Hi everyone, my name is 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓴𝓼 and today we're gonna cover 6th week of challenge read one comic book per day in 2021. I just created this name. On the 6th week of this channel, where I read 7 comics books, and these were 2 books of Tillie Walden. First one was I Love This Part, and it was about 2 girls of preteens, I guess, teenage or preteens, I guess they were teenagers, who were killing time while sharing videos with each other on a summer break, also sharing music, discussing some celebrity gossip, etc., etc. And they didn't have a lot of support in their families, and that's how they developed this friendship, which sooner grow into something bigger. But one of them wasn't ready for this, and that's a really short story in a very Till Walden-esque style, if you can say this. I mean, I just read 2 of her little books. I mean little. They literally like maybe 20 pages or 60 pages. It's like a short story in comics format, and this one I didn't like much, but I can appreciate her art and how she's drawn women and girls. What I also appreciated in this book was how she located them as these big gigantic bodies on industrial landscape or natural landscape, and made them having a little dialogue with each other while being these huge figures around whom the world is rolling around, and the world that was active and busy around them was not able to accommodate them because they were so big and they just couldn't fit into this. I think that's a good visual representation of how many teenagers feel, and that was a sweet little artistic decision that Till Walden took. I appreciated this, but what I didn't appreciate that was how short the story was, so I wasn't able to completely feel close to these people, so that was okay, I would say. But the second story was much better. It was A City Inside, also by Till Walden. It was about coming of age journey in form of this little girl growing up in a big house, quite empty, with her father, and then she's just moving into her inside world, and at the same time she's traveling outside. So it's about traveling both inside and outside of you. It was really great, also artistically, because I like this theme of traveling and being on the road. It was like she's fallen in love, she's fallen out of love, the first relationship and the struggles of them. But what I really enjoyed was this theme of home and homelessness and feeling homeless and having no home to return to. It was honestly, it hit really close home for me, so I enjoyed this second little short story by Till Walden much better. The next one was The Last Witch by Conor McCreery, and that was the first issue of the comics that just started to be released in 2021. By the time I'm recording this video, I already read the second issue, and I would say that's not a middle grade comics because I had this assumption about it, that it is middle grade, because it's drawn in this, I think it's a common word that I will use today, because as a person who just learning English, I'm being playful with creating new words and with all of this grammar structures. So I think that's what we're learning today, Disney-esque. So it has this feeling of something that is drawn for children and for middle graders, but by now I already read the second issue, and I would say I will not recommend it for children, or for preteens. So it has really nice artistic style, very sweet, and roundy, if I can say this. I mean, faces of people, and the landscapes are drawn in really nice and cartoonish way, in a good way. I mean, Disney animation cartoonish way. And the story itself, it just started to develop, so it was just a nice setup for something bigger, and I think that would be probably, that's my prediction right now. I predict that it would be probably 2 to 3 TPBs. I hope it will be, because I honestly enjoyed this setup. I had much more questions for the second issue, but that's good when you read in something and you have questions. That means questions regarding the plot, not questions like what is going on. I think that's good when you're reading and developing some questions inside of you. That means the author can hook you up and make you think about what's inside of it, what's deeper. I forgot to to mention what the story is about. So the setup is like this: there is this little village where the girl with a strange birthmark lives. The girl is traveling out of the village to the abandoned tower to have a little adventure, because there is a legend that the witch is living there, but she does not believe it, and she wants to prove herself that she has courage. And all the events based on Gaelic mythology. I think it will be heavily fantasy focused, action packed story, but that's a nice start. The next comic that I read was much less cheerful. That was We Will Soon Be Home Again by Jessica Bonde, Bergting, and Kathryn Renta, which is telling 6 stories of Holocaust survivors. It's drawn really good. It's telling the stories in first person, and the stories was taken from real Holocaust survivors who decided to share the stories with the creators of the comics. And one of them, by the way, was born in Ukrainian town, so it was really nice and unexpected little detail that I enjoyed a lot. It was heartbreaking, of course, but I think that's necessary to read this kind of books in book format, in format of a novel, in format of comics, because that's the events we have to remember and to prevent it in the future. And I highly recommend it to everyone. It's there are some blood and cruelty, of course, since it's a Holocaust, but this particular comics is dedicated to educate middle graders about this historical event. There is a little vocabulary of historical terms and personalities at the end of the book, and it was really nice. I knew everything that was explained there, but I think for a middle grade reader it's a great educational tool to have in classroom or at home, to be more aware of the historical event that happened, to more aware of this period of time, and to be more compassionate towards history and towards its victims. The next book was White All Round by Wilfrid Lupano and Stephane Fert. It was about female boarding school in town of Canterbury, Connecticut, in the USA. It was called Prudence Crandall School, and in 1832 it accepted its first black student, and then they decided to be a school solely dedicated for educating black female students. So it was a heartbreaking story, but a very encouraging, also encouraging to learn more, to study, to have this motivation and inspiration for learning more. It was a lot of dark academia style, right? Yeah, dark academia historical style in it. I loved the comics a lot. I loved the drawing so much. It was beautifully drawn. It had a lot of historical value, and it was very strict to the facts of the real events of this real school. So it's also had a lot of information about the real students of this school and the principal of it, and how the things worked there, and how it was closed very soon after the opening, and how students who graduated from it or who were participating in this school, who they later become in life. And it was really, really interesting. And some parts of the actual comics of the, the graphic story, I was rereading after reading the biography of certain students, because I wanted to see how they were portrayed in the comics. And it was really heartwarming that I was able to meet these people through the comics. And it was just, great that they made this project. I'm very, very grateful for the creators of it, because I never knew about the students and their further achievements in life that was presented in this essay at the end of the book. And this essay was heavy with historical facts and personalities, but it was such a satisfying read. And then I returned to the comics again, to the main part of it again, and it was just a lot for me in terms of education and in terms of discovering new events and personalities that I have never studied before. And next to that week were two stories about ghosts. First was Shits, and very, very popular and well-loved comics that I just get to read. Shits by Brenna Thummler, about a girl named Marjorie who is 13 and whose mom died, and she is in charge of their laundry place, their family business, while her dad is struggling with very heavy mental state after the death of his wife, and she also has a younger brother, and she's taking care of all of the family and all of the family business while handling school and her teenage problems at the same time. And she's not very successful in it, and it was very realistic portrait of what the real teenagers in this situation would look like, would act like, because it was also very realistic in terms of that there were adults who were trying to help her and who were, aware of what's going on, and who were conscious about that it's not right what she's doing right now, and it was not the ideal situation for her to be. But at the same time, they didn't have much power and much resources to help her out, and she was kind of left alone in this situation. And at the same time, there was an adult who was trying to take advantage of the situation and take advantage of a 13-year-old who is left alone in this very hard situation to support her family financially and to sustain their family business. And he was trying to take a financial advantage of the situation of dealing with a teenager as a business partner or something. So it was very realistic in these terms, in terms of how adults behaved and in terms of how she behaved. And it was a very heartbreaking story, but at the same time very inspirational, because at the one point of the story she is meeting a preteen ghost. She's meeting a ghost of a child named Wendell, and ghosts portrayed as literal ghosts there, like very, very ghosty. And they are starting their communication, and a series of events happen. So it's all was resolved in a very, very sweet way. I was so worried. I was so terrified that this dramatic setup will lead to dramatic ending, and it will all end in, the worst way possible. But spoiler, it didn't. It really didn't, and it warmed my heart a lot. And it was a lot of, not, it wasn't magical realism, but it was a lot of magical realism feeling to this story, and I enjoyed it a lot. I was just, I was so nervous. I hated this man who tried to interfere their business. I loved Bolden, and I was so annoyed by him because he is a child. He is a ghost of a child. He behaved exactly how, I guess he was 8, how 8-year-old boy, really active and childish, would act in his age. Gosh, that was a lot. There was a lot of emotions there, and I love this story so much. I know that this year, I guess, the second issue is released, and I'm waiting for it eagerly. If you didn't read the first issue yet, you have to do this, really, you have to. And the last story, and it was also about ghosts, was called exactly like this, Ghosts, by Raina Telgemeier. And it was about two sisters, Katrina and Maya, who moved to another town. They were living in the city, and they moved to a little town called 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 because Maya had cystic fibrosis. Both of the girls are of Mexican descent, and their family not heavily into their culture, but they have very good neighbors in this town, 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸, and the neighbor's son come with them, showing the town for them, and they come to the abandoned mission that is filled with ghosts. And the ghosts in the story is very real, like they exist. There is no I mean, Kathrina, she has a little bit of, doubt that they exist. She does not believe in it first, and it was a little bit unrealistic because she was the only one character who did not believe in it. Everyone else, including adults, was like, yeah, it is true. Ghosts exist. So she was the only one who was, having this disbelief. And the ghosts are really real. They didn't have any limitations to their existence. They were lifting people up in the air. They were traveling with people. They were going anywhere they want. They didn't have any rules to their existence. And in the 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 there were a festive days of honoring the dead, where all the people were coming together and having these rich cultural celebrations of their dead relatives. I don't think it was portrayed very close to the actual culture, because looking it was looking very realistic, but not in terms of magical realism, but in terms of like, yeah, that's a real life. We are using phones, we are making selfies with ghosts, we are drinking with them, they're lifting us up to the air to travel by the sea, It was a bit strange, and I didn't like this story as much as I like the shits. What I liked in the story was how relatable the children were acting, just as kids of their age. What I didn't like was how this whole ghost thing was handled, because what was different between the ghosts and the shits, that in the shits, ghosts had clear limitations and rules, and they wasn't just showing themselves to every person possible. And I mean, there was certain things they could do and couldn't do, and in this case, it was just not existence. It was a bit strange for me, and I kind of enjoyed it because also it has a very realistic portrait of cystic fibrosis. I later researched on the illness itself because I also didn't know much about it, but when I read certain experiences for people who suffer from it, and articles, Wikipedia article, of course, but not only, I found out that it was very realistic portrayal of a little girl who is, having this health issue. But in terms of cultural representation, since I know that Raina Telgemeier is not Mexican, I'm not sure how close it was to the actual festive events. I guess the dishes were the real dishes, because I was googling some dishes because I never heard about them, and in the art they were looking the same as in the photos on the internet, but in general, how close she got into the actual culture and how much it was made with respect to the actual culture, I believe this assumptions to the people who belong to this culture. So I liked it less than shits, but anyway, it was a nice middle grade book. And that's all for the wrap up. It was 7 books I read on the 6th week of 2021. Thank you for watching, and we'll meet with you soon.